So I'm going to call to order a meeting of the members of the Liquor Commission to consider appointment or approval of liquor licenses. So I believe John Johnson is with us to go through that for us.
Yes, and these are all renewals. One slight twist is that Farm and Fork LLC that operates the Gleanery is seeking to expand to add a full bar license. So you'll be able to get mixed drinks there. Up to now, they only had beer and wine. Other than that, there's no new applications. These are just renewals. Mockingbird, Co-op, and the general store.
Karen, do we have any concerns about delinquencies on any of these properties as far as either taxes or outstanding utilities? That
No, I don't have any.
okay. Sound good. So I think we can vote on this. These are all similar and all renewals, so I think we can vote on it as a plate, so to speak. So would somebody like
Chairman.
Sorry, what?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Regarding the license of the Mockingbird Tavern license, word on the street is that the owner of Mockingbird Tavern has been having disputes with his neighbors, which have frightened them. And I'm wondering whether this may be germane to his liquor license.
It's a good question. I'm not sure whether it's our purview to consider that. I believe that would be more of a legal issue than a select board issue, but it's a valid question. I don't know whether, John, do you know anything about that circumstance? I mean, not about the about the circumstance of approving or disapproving of a license based on circumstances.
May I make a comment?
Yes, please.
So I have no reports of any, I have no police reports or anything like that that's come to me, that there's any problems up there.
Okay. I have heard, as Mr. Fairman reported, sort of word on the street, but I also am not aware of any formal complaints. I believe that we have, as the liquor commissioners, have the ability to revoke a license if we deem it necessary, but I might be wrong about that.
I believe you're correct, Josh. And I've always taken the position, and I'm not sure if it's correct, that the local liquor commission considers things like this bar next to a school, and that the bigger enforcement comes from the state of Vermont Department of Liquor Control, who has investigators and sends people in to try to buy undercover. And so if it's a character and fitness issue, that would come from the state as opposed to from the town. That's my view. I don't know that it's legally correct.
Yeah, and I think that for us to take any sort of action on something like that, we certainly would have need to have had complaints formally presented. And I'm guessing, I would imagine you're right that we would, if that were to occur, we would certainly seek advice from the Liquor Commission, but we would probably also just refer complaints like that to the Liquor Commission for their evaluation, because it certainly doesn't fall under something we have the expertise for, I don't think. So
I think you're correct on that.
Is there a motion to approve the liquor licenses for the Putney General Store, the Putney Consumers Cooperative, the Farm and Fork, and for Grupperson, Farm and Fork is the Gleanery and Grupperson is Mockingbird Tavern?
I'll make that motion to, as you just said, I'm sorry, I had a computer issue for a second here. I'll make a motion to renew the liquor licenses for the Putney General Store, Putney Consumers Cooperative, Farm and Fork LLC, and Grupperson LLC, the Gleanery and the Mockingbird Tavern.
I'll second.
All right. So it's been moved and seconded to approve the above named liquor license, renewal of the above named liquor licenses for those organizations. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that would complete our Liquor Commission meeting.
One quick issue, Josh.
Yeah.
I need the signatures on the approval forms. Alyssa has the forms, so if we can do that promptly so that we can get them to the state. I know that they have some COVID restrictions, and I want to make sure they have enough time. Liquor licenses expire April 30. So if we can get them up, late this week, early next week, that would be great. Thank you.
Sounds good. I don't know whether, Karen, I don't know whether Alyssa will want to try and do that via
Yes.
you sign.
Electronic, yes.
I believe they're coming to me first, so I have them in my inbox, and I will do it as soon as we adjourn the meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Let's. Motion to adjourn the Liquor Commissioners meeting.
I make that motion.
I'll second that.
So it's been moved and seconded to adjourn the Liquor Commissioners meeting. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, so the Liquor Commission meeting was adjourned at 5:39. And now I would like to call to order the regular Select Board meeting. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda, Karen? You're muted, but I think you said no.
That was a negative.
Yes, okay, sounds good. All right, so we have warrants and we have received those. Somebody want to make a motion related to the warrants?
I'll make a motion to approve and execute the warrants to the treasurer as presented upon completion of review.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve and execute the warrants upon completion of review. So let's go ahead and review them and then we will take a vote. So Karen, you want to go?
Sure. Payroll warrant dated March 26, 2021 in the amount of $19,288.19.
Does anybody have any questions about that one?
No.
No.
All right, and the AP.
Accounts payable, March 13th through March 26, 2021, in the amount of $46,407.89. A nice small one.
Just because I don't know, who's Quill Corporation?
Quill is a supply company for office supplies.
That makes sense. What's the Sync B Amazon?
That would be the library.
Oh, okay.
What did
Right.
fire do for us?
Sorry, go ahead. What was that, David?
What did Firematic supply? What's that? The 3,500.
That is fire gear. So we ended up purchasing some more boots and jackets, pants, and some other equipment. We've added more personnel down there.
Good.
Yep. Excellent.
All right. Any further questions? So it's been moved to approve and execute the warrants to the treasurer as presented, and upon review, we've completed review. So if there are no further questions or comments, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Right.
you.
Good. Thank you. Public comment on items not on the agenda.
Josh, I have a comment, but it relates to the Equity and Inclusion Committee, so should I wait for that item?
Yeah, if you would, Fletcher, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you.
David?
Minutes. Did we do the minutes?
Oh, all right.
No.
Oh,
Good catch.
skipped right over that. Sorry about that. So approval of minutes of March 10th and March 17th.
Motion to approve those minutes, March 10th and March 17th, 2021.
I second.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of March 10th and March 17th, 2021. Is there any discussion or question related to the minutes? Doesn't sound like it. So we will go ahead and approve the minutes of March 10th and 17th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. We did warrants. Again, public comment. Fletcher's going to wait till the EIC section. Any other folks who want to make a public comment?
I wanted to ask a question. It's my understanding that those two signs where the source of our Putney water comes from, town water comes from, are going to be put up soon. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Because we agreed that would be protecting that area, that source of our water, and over the years we have people dump all kinds of stuff there. So that would be really, really important. So it will be going up soon, you say? The signs?
Yes.
One
Yes.
at each end?
Yes, we have
Okay.
2 signs for Sand Hill for the water protection.
Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you.
And we have those in hand, Karen?
Yes, they're sitting in the office and I will have Brian's crew put them up.
Sounds good. It might be an issue. Might be a frost issue still for a week or two.
Correct.
I'm not sure, but
Brian will know best.
we'll work on it. Any other public comment on items not on the agenda?
John,
Mr. Chairman?
John has his hand up.
Sorry, who does?
John?
John, go ahead.
Just like to remind everybody that dog licenses expire April 1. If you haven't already renewed your dog license, please do so before that. Thank you.
Thank you. David, you were trying to say something, or Mr. Fairman?
Mr. Fairman was. I was trying to let you know John had his hand up because I didn't think you could see him.
Yeah, I can't, sorry. Mr. Fairman, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. People mentioning the water system put me in mind of a question I was wondering about today. I noticed that a well is being drilled on Old Depot Road, which of course is in Putney Village. So my question is, why is there no town water on Old Depot Road?
There is town water
yes.
on Old Depot Road. In fact, there's a substation or a pump station out at the end of Old Depot that goes across under the highway. So presumably that is somebody that chose not to attach to the municipal system and is either drilling a new well or deepening their well, or I'm not sure. but there is water out there. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was curious because I thought I heard well drilling, and when I got where I could see down the road, yes, that's what they're doing. And the other thing was then walking along, I was thinking I'm going to look for wellheads, and I saw a couple, but of course those could predate the either, as you say, they didn't connect, or they predate when it was laid, whenever that was. Thank you.
I mean, just a historical note on that, you know, there obviously before there was a water system, there were many private wells in the village. It often was the case that the quality of water was not very satisfactory. And there are a number of households that chose to stay on their own systems for a period of time. I don't think we have many left, but that must be one of them. But I think both depth and quality were issues historically. So hopefully somebody has good luck. All right. Next on the agenda, select board items for discussion and action. Adopt policies and procedures. You want to walk us through those at all, Karen, or do we? I mean, we've had the opportunity to review them, and as we talked about last time, they are really pretty much direct out of VLCT recommendations, correct?
Correct, and they will be annually readopted.
Renewed, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So should we adopt those, or should we move to adopt those as two separate items or as a single item?
I would do them as separate.
Okay. Want to make a motion?
Motion to adopt and approve the rules of procedure for the Putney Select Board as presented. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt the rules of procedure policy. Sorry, I just lost my, so I have, is there any discussion related to said policy?
No, is that part of the DocuSign signature thing, or do we have to come in and sign them, or do we not have to sign them? Is that a signature page at the end?
Right, we can do the DocuSign with that too.
Okay. I don't have anything else.
Mr. Fairman?
A couple of questions to clarify. First, these rules of procedure, are you simply renewing existing rules of procedure, or is this something completely new?
To the best of my knowledge, we've done a version of it in the past, I believe, but I don't think we did last year, Karen. Is that right?
No, we did, because Laura was on the board at that time, and we had done both of these.
Okay.
And we have a new select board member as of March, so.
So the answer is they're neither new. Well, yes, they're new, but we're renewing them this year, and we do them annually.
Correct.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So then my second question and final question is, are there any substantive changes to the rules of procedure?
I don't think.
The only thing that we made sure of, Mr. Fairman, was the day that we're having the meeting, where we have the meeting, and of course, it's every other Wednesday. And before it was bi-weekly. So we want to make it clear that it's every other Wednesday.
And I know, Mr. Fairman, that you had raised a question about that. The problem with it, and I can't remember whether we answered your question at the time or not, but the problem with it having every, for example, first and third Wednesday or second and fourth Wednesday is that because of warrants, that then puts us at risk of not having a meeting scheduled for a time when we have warrants. So essentially, but Karen, I believe that the schedule for our meetings, the complete schedule for our meetings is listed on the website. Is that correct?
That is correct on the calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have addressed my concern that I expressed back then, which was that it wasn't clear, and now it appears that it is. It's simply every other Wednesday.
Yes. Good.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about this procedure?
We're still on the first one. No.
Yeah.
This is Swift. I just had a question. I'm just reading in the chat that switching from Robert's rules to VLCT, I'm curious if we can do the 2-minute review of what that change looked like, how it, yeah, because I still hear Robert's rules and I thought that's what we used. So I'm curious what that looks like and what the 2-minute version.
Oh, so I'll just read what's in the chat. It says, are these the VLCT recommended rules? Yes, they are from VLCT. And we changed to the VLCT last year over Robert's rules. That was Laura in the chat.
But I think that Robert's rules would still be sort of the default for regular conduct of meeting would be my assumption, but that this governs things that don't necessarily fall within that. Does that sound right?
Okay.
Correct.
Are there the top 3 things that are different? Or I'm just curious is there the differences or something published somewhere?
Robert's rules, there's a whole book on Robert's rules.
It's a whole book.
Right.
And it's not a small one. There are, let's see, I mean, the most concise version that I've seen recently was Meg Mott made up a mini cheat sheet on Robert's rules for town meeting, but it's really very basic. But you can, I would assume we might have a copy at Town Hall, but it really is pretty substantial. So these
it looks like we moved away from that, right? I mean,
well, again, that would be for sort of general conduct in a meeting, that would probably be the default just because it's sort of the accepted norm. But this is, and these, I would say that these, for all practical purposes, and this is strictly anecdotal, not research, but that this would be broadly, most of the conduct in the meeting portion of this would be based on a version of Robert's rules is what it looks like to me. But again, that's just my observation and not scientific data.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I can offer the clarification that Putney Public Library has both the latest version of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, and the Robert's Rules in brief. And for anybody who'd like an overview, the in brief book is excellent, and the other one is a brick. You don't want to drop it on your foot, but the in brief is quite accessible.
Josh, I think John has his hand up too and has a comment.
Okay. Sorry, Karen. I know. Get John, hang on one sec, Karen.
I also wanted to comment, Swift, that each board and commission will be signing this document as well. So it just sets parameters on how they should go about their meetings.
John?
I believe Meg's summary is in the 2019 town report, if you still have a copy of that lying around. I don't think we
right.
put it in
I can look at that. I guess I'm curious more about the VLCT. I don't know what that stands for. I don't know.
The VLCT,
my question is more
is the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and it is, I think technically it's a quasi-governmental that is an it's a Vermont established league that provides a select board handbook and training on select board process, et cetera, as well as a multitude of other things related to municipal legal issues, municipal insurance, et cetera, et cetera. And so they are sort of the go-to organization within the state for helping towns address issues that are sort of beyond the town's ability to necessarily make the judgment without some outside advice.
Correct.
So we've officially on paper, we're not using Robert's rules, but we still use it because it's what, I'm just needing clarification here. Sorry. Thank you for being patient with me.
So, I mean, this policy is based on, no, I wouldn't say that we have, I wouldn't say we've officially moved away from Robert's rules, but I'm not sure that we ever officially adopted Robert's rules. They are the accepted norm.
Got it.
We are officially adopting this, but I'm not sure that officially sort of means we don't follow Robert's rules. I would say Robert's rules again are the default. Fletcher, yeah, you want to try and clarify?
Yeah, Vermont statutes require that any public meeting of this sort be conducted pursuant to Robert's rules unless you formally adopt another rule of procedure. Vermont Robert rules are the required procedure in the absence of a substitute.
Thank you. And
VLCT is not an alternative set of rules. It's just an additional.
It's basically a modified version. It's a modified, simplified version.
And I think that to the point of that Mr. Fairman made about the full version being, something you don't want to drop on your foot. If what was not covered in this policy that we were adopting was brought into question, then we would default and refer to Robert's rules. So this, by the definition Fletcher has provided, this would supersede that, but only in the context of the issues that it addresses, and otherwise Robert's rules would be the fallback. So, and that's Robert's rules are, in this country, for better or for worse, they are pretty universally accepted as sort of standard conduct of meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. So it's been moved and seconded to adopt the rules of procedure for the Putney Select Board. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And Laura pointed out in the chat that VLCT recommends this over Robert's rules. So again, just for the basics. But okay, so our next step is to adopt the conflict of interest and ethical conduct policy for elected officials. Karen, you want to say anything about that or not?
Whoops. No, again, there is no changes to this particular policy. And annually, the select board should be looking at all policies and either revising, renewing as things do change. So, but this one is important. And again, I don't believe we've done this with other committees, just the select board. But that's not to say we shouldn't be looking at committees and having them adopt this as well. Now, this particular one is for elected officials and statutorily appointed employees to perform executive, administrative, legislative, or quasi-judicial functions of the town of Putney. So that would include like development review board members, planning commission members as well. So as we reorganize with all the committees.
Listers,
Yeah.
cemetery commission,
Yes.
so
Would
we should make
Would it
sure.
also apply to John, since he's the town clerk? Is he appointed now, or is he?
He is appointed.
Okay.
All right, so are there any questions or comments about the conflict of interest and ethical conduct policy for Putney Select Board and other elected officials?
I guess I just say again, this is Swift. Is there a place we can see that? I'd love to read that. I don't know if it's posted or.
That particular one is on the website, our website under
Great.
policies. The other ones haven't.
Thank
made it.
you.
Yep.
All right. If there's no further comment or question, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Statutorily incompatible offices.
I think that was part of the discussion we had last week to make sure.
Yeah.
Or the week before, whenever that was.
Right. So we are not adopting that, obviously.
No.
This is just statutory. I think the answer was basically, Eileen, that it's not technically an incompatible office, but it's not always necessarily highly recommended. Is that was my impression.
Planning Commission, yeah. So I think we recommended that, and I indicated that I'd like to become an alternate on that committee, since they already have another alternate. So that means I could still attend meetings. And I guess that would mean if Vanessa wasn't available, then I would be a voting member. But until they find more people, I feel like that's fair.
Okay. Alyssa?
I'm not sure that you actually asked for a motion on that second one. I think you jumped right to pass.
That's right.
Oh, whoops.
I missed that too.
Boy, that was efficient.
I make a motion to adopt, wait, which one are we on? Adopt the
Conflict of interest.
ethical interest policy as written.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and unless there's any further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Alyssa. All right, Sandglass Theater resolution. So people will remember from quite some time now ago that Sandglass
A year ago.
was looking to get town support, or actually, I guess we have to do the application, but we have to be a partner to the application. Is that how it is, Karen? Yeah, go ahead, and if you can explain this.
So we're going to submit it on behalf of Sandglass Theater.
Okay.
They've done some substantial work on their end, and of course, we had to have forms that need to be signed by myself and a notary, which will be John Johnson. So as the town clerk, he's also a notary. So he'll be notarizing my signature on the forms. All the forms are ready to be signed. We need the resolution as part of the criteria for the package. And the Sandglass, for the public's information, they're borrowing, well, they're actually trying to get a grant from the USDA business. It's, hang on a minute, Rural Business Development Grant. It's in the amount of $10,730. They have to have a matching amount of $5,365. So there was much preparation in this grant for them to be able to get equipment to continue doing what they're doing because of COVID. So the resolution is in front of the select board for signature.
All right. So I guess we should start with a motion on this one, maybe.
Okay, I make a motion that we approve the signature of, no, that's bad. I make a motion to approve this resolution as written.
And I'll second that.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve this resolution as written, which is with regards to agreeing to apply for financial assistance through the USDA for Sandglass Theater for equipment. Are there any questions or comments related to that? All right. In the absence of, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Select Board appointments. Dan Toomey very generously brought to our attention that he sent us a note that the district clerk will need a note from the Putney Select Board reappointing me in time for a reorganization meeting, which is always the first district board meeting in April. I believe the date will be April 8th. A simple email to here will do stating that I have been reappointed. From Dan Toomey. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank Dan because he has done this for a really long time. And it's sort of a quiet, sleepy little position, but at the same time, it's really important. And it's great that Dan has been willing to do that for as long as he has, and that he's willing to do it again. So thank you, Dan. If somebody would like to make a motion to reappoint Dan to the Windham Solid Waste Management District.
I'll make the motion to reappoint Dan Toomey to the Windham Solid Waste Management District as our representative.
Second.
Right. It's been moved and seconded to appoint Dan Toomey. Is there any discussion or questions related to that? Seeing as there are none, then all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Good. Thanks again, Dan. And then next would be Core Trowbridge and Mike. We have Mike spelt wrong on the agenda, but we all know him as, well, Mike or Michael. And Core, I think, is the primary and Mike is an alternate. Is that right, Karen? I think that's
what it says on the.
Yeah. So, and same to Core and Mike, thank you for being willing to step up to take this role. I know that it's important, and I also know that there's sort of a lot of different aspects of the discussion related to this at this point with public versus DV, et cetera, et cetera. So, is there a motion to approve Core Trowbridge as the representative and Mike Mrowicki as the alternate for the DV Fiber Board?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All right, been moved and seconded to make those approvals. Are there any questions or comments?
I have one comment.
Okay.
So there is room for a second alternate if anybody is interested in serving on this communication union district.
Good. Yeah. If Core, do you want to comment on the necessity of that, or whether, I mean, obviously, sort of more is better, probably, but should we be?
So far, I've been able to attend all the meetings, and Mike has been at some of them as well. I mean, of course, it would be helpful to have a third person just in case both of us are tied up. But it is kind of a lot to jump into. So
right.
If anybody wants to contact me about that, I can put my email in the chat.
That'd be great. Thank you. All right. So it's been moved and seconded, and to appoint Core Trowbridge and Mike Mrowicki to the DV Fiber Board. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. And then Core, up to you to give us a broadband update, I'm guessing.
You got it. Hi, everybody. Core Trowbridge, and I'm Putney's representative to DV Fiber, which is the business name for the Deerfield Valley Communications Union District. And that district now has 21 towns because Windham just joined. And Townsend is still not quite joined, but is considering it. And this communications union district is meeting regularly with the one in Bennington. So, which is called like Southern Vermont CUD. So it really is going to be a region-wide project for all of Southern Vermont. There was big news yesterday. You must have heard that House Bill 360 passed, and that was $150 million for broadband. And that passed in the House. So that's gone to the Senate in the House in the switchover. But it is expected to pass. So that's really good news. And also there's been a bunch of federal legislation proposed by Congressman Welch, and just a lot of money that's starting to flow towards these projects, which basically these CUD projects are going to rely on to get going. The project put forth an RFP, and there were 24 vendors that attended a Q&A session. The responses are due March 31st. And so we'll see what comes of that. The purpose of getting going on this is to be basically ready to go when funding is there. And the goal of the project is to make fiber to the premises available at every location in the towns that are part of the project, and at 1 gig symmetrical speeds. And it is a goal, though it's going to be a public-private partnership in terms of financing. The goal is to have the public part maintain control. So it will be a publicly run project in terms of customer service and all that kind of stuff, and ownership. So that's where we're at right now, and I welcome your questions.
This is a little bit of a detail, Corbett. I'm interested in the fact that there were 24 vendors. I'm assuming, based on earlier conversations about this, those probably wouldn't be all. Those would be a mix of vendors for different parts of it, because it's too big a project for many single vendors to take on. Correct?
That's correct. It was a Q&A session that was open to anyone. But it's just a measure of interest. I have heard from the board that they do expect there to be proposals received. Karen and I talked a little bit today about it. She's interested in finding out more in specifics about those proposals and the cost per town, that kind of thing, to inform her about any RFP that might be undertaken on behalf of Putney. But right now, this is a region-wide RFP. And they have hired a consultant to help evaluate the responses. So this funding being awarded, this is much higher than anticipated. And so there's a lot of excitement about that.
So I want to add too that I know in the past we talked about putting our own request for proposal out as a town. I have 3 template proposals. There's one that I like, and after talking with Core today and knowing that bids will be in next week, it might give us an idea on, cost. But again, with DV fiber, it's going to be a whole for all 21 towns. I've been speaking with Consolidated. They've done a lot of infrastructure projects over in New Hampshire, and we know that bonding is going to be an issue in Vermont for infrastructure project like this. And we don't have any idea of a cost. And the only way we're going to do that is to put an RFP out. So the town also needs to consider that, will the town build this infrastructure and own it and maintain it? Will a service provider do that? So there's still a lot of unknowns right at the moment. It's reassuring that there will be money to build this. And again, we have to be shovel ready in order to capitalize on those funds. So still a lot of balls in the air, and I'm learning a lot about it. It's just, this is not my area of expertise, and I have reached out to somebody in the community who does have some experience with this, and he has given me some input, and there may be more work to do together.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Possibly the town manager just now referred to me, although she may have referred to someone else, but I can tell you that town manager Astley has shared with me and invited me to comment on 2 draft requests for proposal, in quotation marks, to extend broadband internet access. Neither is created by and for the town of Putney. Having managed such projects while a corporate telecommunications manager, I note that an RFP should be as clear and simple as possible so that candidates feel free to match their technologies and business plans to their potential customers' needs. The sine qua non is that every candidate receive the same RFP stating the problem to be solved and inviting their questions and solutions. What and when are there broadband internet solutions for Putney? You could invite Comcast Xfinity, Consolidated Communications, Deerfield Valley Communications Union District, and First Light Fiber to present costed and scheduled proposals to connect every Putney E911 address to 1,000 megabit per second internet access, applying any available federal and state grants and subsidies. Their futures are online, so they should be highly motivated. If not, each will have had the same opportunity and a competitor will prevail. Familiar and comfortable with this back and forth, I could volunteer to assist our town manager with this negotiation, which would entail our meeting with candidates to answer their questions. If necessary to raise and appropriate funding, you then could duly schedule and warn a special town meeting organized as were our successful 2021 annual town meeting and preceding public informational meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fairman. You are the person I was referring to.
Core, I'm assuming that DV Fiber as an organization would not be, and I could be totally mistaken here, would not be looking to respond to an RFP of that type. Is that correct, do you think?
Yeah, I'm a little out of my league here, but I would think that that's not the case. But the DV Fiber could make a presentation on how the rollout of the district would look.
Yeah.
And the costs that would be expected.
So it would be less of a proposal to do construction and more of a proposal of an anticipated plan for the broader district, probably.
Right. Or like they might say, or you know, this is how we anticipate phase 1, phase 2. These are the costs. I mean, and I break it down by town, I guess. I just don't know.
Yeah.
They're not in the same exact bucket as another kind of provider.
That's sort of what I would have assumed, yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Thank you for bringing that up. Now, the reason I framed what I said in terms of, in the way I did, is because I am looking at Putney's interests. And
Yes.
Putney's interests, it would seem to me, are that we get the fastest broadband internet access to every E91 address in Putney as soon as possible. Now, the way I phrased it was, I said, their futures are online, so they should be highly motivated. If not, each will have had the same opportunity and a competitor will prevail. If Deerfield Valley Communications Union District chooses not to respond, that is their choice. But then, of course, they are not necessarily going to receive the same consideration as any of the others I have mentioned, who most likely will respond. Consolidated Communications have already put themselves in the running. And I would certainly wonder why Comcast Xfinity would not be in the running, because they're building themselves out in Putney at the present time, having bought the existing cable system.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I guess my assumption would be that DV Valley would certainly want to see that proposal and participate in the conversation. I would imagine, and I am way out of my league here in making assumptions about it, but that one of the things we would need to consider in that is well, time frame clearly, but costs involved and also ultimate ownership and where that falls, because I think that has been a question for us. So, you know, we might, the CUD might be able to enlighten us on what certain implications might be for the town in the long run, both financially and responsibility wise, in ways that the other companies would not be looking at it the same way because of their profit driven nature. But you're right. I mean, the desire would be to get the best service we can as quickly as we can, but I think we would be wise to have as much advice on that as we can. So
I could be wrong about that, honestly. It's not my area. But so, I mean, that's why I'm attending all the meetings. So any information that needs to come back to the town, you know, I'll bring it here. But they may be perfectly ready to respond to a proposal. I just don't know.
Mr. Chairman?
hang on one sec. Town manager wants to say something first, Mr. Fairman, and then you.
Yeah, I just wanted to let the board know that I'll continue working with Core and Mike for further information, and I will reach back out to Mr. Fairman. We still have some work to do, and there's a lot of unanswered questions, and on both sides, you know, some risk. So we want to be certain to, you know, take the appropriate steps.
Excuse me, I'm going to interject. Let us not take on something that we have to maintain.
I've already considered that, Eva. Thank you. That is something that Cora and I spoke about today. You know, there are different options, and we don't want to take a risky one. And honestly, if we were to own our own infrastructure for broadband, it would basically be set up the same way water and sewer is. You know, it'd be user fee based, and you know, the town would have to manage that. You know, and in the future, as technology changes so rapidly, you know, the cost to upgrade something like that would probably be astronomical, and I'm not comfortable, you know, taking that on, you know, as a town manager. And you would have to know somebody that can, you know, work on something like that. You know, we'd probably have to contract it out, just like we do water and sewer.
Right.
You know.
Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
It seems to me that we are way ahead of ourselves here. We are talking about hypothetical situations when we actually do not have any concrete proposals in front of us. Now, for example, provider X may very well come to us and say, we simply will extend our existing network, and we're already doing this sort of thing, so we'll simply build it out. And here is how much it's going to cost, and here's when we can do it. Then we'll have something concrete where we can be having these discussions about, can we afford this and do we want to do it? Now, coming back specifically, not for any particular reason other than as an example, I've been looking at Consolidated Communications annual reports, the Securities and Exchange Commission Forms 10K. And in their latest annual report, they call this fiber overbuild. And they have 8 projects in Vermont currently in progress or about to begin. So it's not just the one in Chesterfield, and it's not something new for them. So, and I would reckon the same would be true for the other possible candidates. They're in this business, and they know where they are in terms of what they already have, what their technologies are, and what their business plans are. And if we simply say, what can you do for us? They will come back with, here's our proposal, how we would like to put it together. Then we'll be in a situation to compare and contrast and discuss and find out things like how much are we going to be in for on this, if anything, given that there may be, as Cor has pointed out, some rather large subsidies. The actual figure, which she didn't mention, is $150 million for statewide.
I think she did mention it. I didn't hear Cor say whether she knows, and I'm guessing she doesn't, how much of that is actually coming to our neck of the woods. But
Mike is here, so he could speak to that.
Mike, you out there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, good. I'm actually multitasking right now. We're still in session on the House floor right now. I'm trying to finish up work, but I did want to check in here. In regards to monies that we are dedicating, initially the governor suggested $20 million for broadband, and it was a rather disappointing figure because what's been shared is that to build out broadband to the last mile and every address is about a $300 million endeavor. That's why when the House decided we were going to throw in $150 million of money that will be coming from Washington, that boosted it up significantly. And I'm confident that what we're hearing is, along with that, in the next year, President Biden is going to be offering an infrastructure plan, which includes more money yet for rural broadband. Now, in regards to whether this is going to be money available for private companies, the emphasis is going to be on CUDs first. If private companies want to work with the CUDs, then that's another question. The rationale is that the private companies have had decades to build out, and they haven't. And the idea that we're going to have to fund them with our money to do their work didn't sit too well. So that's why the CUD plan seems to be taking preference now. And who knows what happens when the bill gets sent over to the Senate. But I think we're on the same page with that. So the short of it is, I think there's going to be money. I think the CUD process is going to accelerate fast. And it won't hurt to get a proposal from Consolidated to see what they can do and where their money would come from. Because I think if we had the choice between a grant and bonding or having customers pay for it, we would do better to go for the grants. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of says the same thing of, that we should keep the CUD informed and keep them in the conversation and sort of see where they see us in their picture as well as where we can see them in our picture. All right. Well, thank you for your work on helping Karen with figuring out RFPs, and we'll see where we go with that. So, and thank you, Cor, for representing us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cor.
All right. So next on our agenda is Equity and Inclusion Committee. And I know Fletcher wanted to make a comment related to that. I guess I just want to say that I want to start this conversation with my personal expression that I think we all really share the same ultimate interest and goal of making Putney as equitable and inclusive as we possibly can. And what all the different steps and how that looks and how that will come to fruition are not clear in this moment. And they're not clear, as far as I can tell, for just about anywhere in this moment. But we have a lot to do, and I hope we can really honestly figure out how to do that as productively and cooperatively as we possibly can. And I know sometimes it doesn't feel like the select board necessarily is coming from that position, but I think we really are. I think we really are also just trying to fulfill our sort of basic duty of doing the business of the town as select board members that have been elected to undertake that role. So, Eileen.
Josh, I have a sales pitch. Is this a good time to?
Sure.
Sales pitch.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have we have 29 people at the moment total, and not counting all of the people who are have to be in this meeting. That's over 20 people attending this meeting, and obviously that's a lot for a select board. So now you're all my captive audience. So here's my sales pitch. The town has several boards and committees that need members. All of these boards preside over policies, procedures, and actions that have a direct bearing on us as citizens of Putney. The best and most direct way to further the work of equity and inclusion in town, the very best way to change policies and procedures that have roots in systemic racism and create unequal systems is to change the makeup of those boards by making them more diverse or appointing people who can do the work with an equity lens. But we need people to be willing to step into those roles. So here are the boards. The Development Review Board, which is a quasi-judicial board, which has direct say over the approval of subdivisions and land use changes in Putney, needs 2 members. The Board of Listers is charged with maintaining the grand list. The listers are directly responsible for the equitable assessment of all land and real property in Putney, and also regularly interact with the public. They need 1 member. The Energy Committee, which is an advisory board to the Planning Commission and the Select Board, is in desperate need of members. This committee is currently in the process of writing an energy plan and is charged with advising the Select Board on things like preferred siting for solar and wind projects, transportation issues, energy efficiency initiatives, and so on. The Planning Commission, which is a quasi-legislative board and that is charged with writing the town plan, which is essentially a blueprint of what we'd like Putney to look like, and then crafting the zoning regulations which affect all of us here in town, could use alternates, especially as they are about to engage in the process of rewriting the town plan. And then there are some very important elected positions, which pretty much go uncontested every year, but bear an enormous amount of influence over all of us. There are 9 justices of the peace, 3 listers, and 3 select board members who, in addition to their primary purposes, sit on or are involved in the Board of Abatement, which is charged with abating property taxes, and the Board of Civil Authority, which, among other things, hears the appeals of grievances and has authority over the voter checklist. Since you all are here concerned about the progress of equity and inclusion here in Putney, I don't think I have to tell you how each of the above can either contribute to the status quo or contribute to real change in Putney. So I hope at least some of you here today take the passion, the really awesome passion that you have towards equity and inclusion, and use it as your impetus to consider joining one of these boards or running for an office. I really think that's where the most positive change can happen, and we need you. No one person and no one committee can hope to accomplish it alone. So that's my sales pitch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.
Fletcher, you had said earlier you would like to make a comment, so.
Yes, I would. I'd like to read a statement that, and as was done with the statement read last meeting, I'd ask that it be incorporated into the minutes. I can send Karen a copy after the meeting.
Okay.
At the last select board meeting and the discussion of the activities of the Equity and Inclusion Committee, a board member flatly declared that Vermont law requires committees established by the board must be advisory only. The law that was cited in support of this proposition is 24 VSA section 4433. 24 VSA section 4433 is inapplicable. As noted at the time, section 4433 is in chapter 117 of title 24. Chapter 117 is the portion of the statute on municipal government that deals with land use planning and development. Section 4433 refers to committees set up to gather public input on changes to town zoning regulations and the town plan. Committees set up for these purposes are advisory, but this limitation is not applicable generally to all committees of the select board. The applicable statute for general purposes is 24 VSA section 872, which is in chapter 33. Larry Slayson cited section 872 in his September 11, 2019 memo to Karen advising you on the formation of the Equity and Inclusion Committee. As he stated in that memo, quote, the select board can choose to create an official committee of the select board subject to all laws and procedures governing select board meetings. Alternatively, the select board could encourage the creation of an ad hoc advisory committee comprised of volunteer members not appointed by the select board and not under the supervision of the select board, close quote. The board understood this distinction at the time, but has apparently forgotten it now. It was a member of the public who originally referred the board to section 4433 a few meetings ago. I absolutely support the right of any member of the public to come before this board and express any opinion he wants, including an opinion on what statute might be applicable to the process. He has that right, but then you have a responsibility. Your responsibility is to do the research and find out if his opinion is correct before you adopt it. You failed to fulfill that responsibility. The board has other responsibilities. High among them is the responsibility to comply with the open meeting law. I believe that you have failed at that as well. A member of the board as much as admitted that last meeting when he acknowledged that the statement that was read into the record on February 24 had been worked on by the board at some length in executive session. That statement was then unveiled and adopted at the meeting, despite the fact that every time the board had come out of executive session previously, the minutes stated that no decision was made and no action taken as a result of the executive session. This was clearly not true. This was a failure to comply with the law, but more importantly, it was a failure to allow the community to be part of the process. I've asked you before and I'll ask you again, why was the discussion of the role of and functioning of the Equity and Inclusion Committee conducted entirely behind closed doors? Why is that not a matter that should be open for public discussion? Worse still, why was no member of the Equity and Inclusion Committee, much less the committee as a whole, ever invited to participate in those discussions? Why was no member of the public who may have felt aggrieved by the actions of the committee ever invited to participate? The minutes record no such participation, even in the many executive sessions. Rather than an open process, this board chose to conceal the discussion from the public. This was not just a probable violation of the open meeting law, it also pushed exactly in opposition to the work of the committee. A fundamental purpose of this committee is to promote discussions of difficult issues in the public sphere. It is not surprising that the activities of this committee might make members of the public uncomfortable or even upset. Confronted with that, however, one member of the board chose to conduct her own investigation and information gathering mission. I describe this as a unilateral action by one board member because nowhere in the minutes of this board's meetings does it appear that the member was authorized by the board to undertake this mission. From all that appears in the public record, she acted as a private individual pursuing a personal agenda. And then this board, without any further inquiry into the bases of her conclusion, simply adopted them wholesale. My question to you now is this. If you felt this committee went too far afield when you weren't paying attention, why weren't you there? Why was no member of this board appointed to the committee? Committees that are responsible for pursuing important work delegated to them by select boards often have a member of the select board assigned to them, and that member gives regular reports back to the select board on the activities of the committee. Why was that not done here? The bottom line is that you got some blowback and now you want to distance yourself from the important work of this committee. Rather than seeking to support the work of the committee, you are seeking to eviscerate it. You did not defend or support the committee, and now you want to cut them loose. In doing so, you fail not just this committee, but the community. This is not a failure of the committee, it is a failure of leadership by this board. Thank you.
Thank you. There has been some failure of leadership by this board. And Eileen, of course, is not included in this group aspect of the discussion because she is so new to it. But without your statement in front of me, Fletcher, it's a little bit hard for me to sort of go through step by step. But we did have some failure of leadership. I think significantly, we all agreed when this resolution was adopted, and the resolution, I hear what you're saying about an ad hoc versus a select board committee. However, the resolution states very clearly that this is an advisory committee to the board. So my assumption would be that if it's stated in the resolution that it's an advisory committee, then the role of the committee would be advisory. That's not what happened. This committee from the beginning we had this discussion, and you can review those tapes if you want to. All of our discussions, with the exception of executive session, and I hear what you're saying, Fletcher, and I understand that, and I have spent a lot of time considering your position on executive session, and I think that we probably flirted with the boundaries of executive session in ways that we shouldn't have, and I apologize for that. I think that we need to explore that a little bit more and see whether we would change any of the decision-making process that we had during executive session or didn't have during executive session, because you're right. I'm sort of mixing who you're referring to with sort of my recollection and assumptions, but I think that the construction of that, the writing of that statement was something that we talked about in executive session, but we largely talked about the appointment nature of it. And I heard you last time when you spoke about, I think I may be mixing my conversations here, but the nature of sort of talking about appointment of a committee versus appointment of individuals. And I understand that, and that may have been a mistake. We may have overstepped on that. I think that the reason we held as much in executive session as we did is because, as I stated before, I think in open session, and I will state again in open session, some of it was related to appointment of individuals, and that you say that we didn't have any other exploration beyond the information that was presented from Barra McNeil, but the reality is each of us has had conversations with individuals who have been at the other end of these events that occurred. And so, you know, where it's sort of hearsay and where it's he said, she said, we're not a court of law, and we shouldn't be. If anything illegal occurred, anybody that knows of that should absolutely take that to the appropriate authorities. No question about it. Whether it's regardless of whether it's something that happened generated from a member of any committee in any town function, and or if it's committed by somebody else towards a member of any committee of town function. If there was illegal activity, please, I encourage you to report it to the officials that would be appropriate for that. As far as our activity was concerned, the letter then, there were drafts of the letter, as you pointed out. Those letters, we did not convene a quorum for drafting a letter. Barra actually largely wrote a letter and then forwarded it to Karen, shared it with Karen, shared it with David and I. You know, we didn't do this in a group session. So again, I take your criticism to heart, and I understand that we probably and perhaps should have done this differently. But I guess I would argue that it certainly was not our intent to break open meeting law. It was our intent to protect personal and confidential conversations between people that we felt it was not appropriate to be in a public setting. Beyond that, I can't really elaborate on that. As far as the failure of leadership is concerned, it was very clear from the time that this resolution was adopted that the first step of this committee was to convene and decide for itself and bring to us a recommendation for a charge for what the committee would do. Never happened, never happened, never happened. And I'm sorry, we still don't have a charge for this committee. There's a failure of leadership here in not having created that charge, and we are taking that on now. That's what we have to do. We were never presented with a charge. We were asked, the committee was also asked if it could, and we agreed that it should and could review policy, some of the policies, town policies. We got response on one policy related to the employment policy. But other than that, we haven't seen the committee function as an advisory committee to the board. And so it leaves us in a complicated position, because we are not trying to stonewall the work that needs to be done. And that can be painted however, I mean, that could be portrayed in any way it's going to be portrayed. I personally, and I think all the select board members, share a very clear desire to do this work. What we also share is a clear desire to delineate what is appropriate for an advisory board to the an advisory committee to the select board, which is what we resolved to create, what's appropriate for them to be doing, and what's appropriate for this member. There's 20 people on this meeting. There is nothing to prevent the 20 people on this meeting from getting together and figuring out every single civil action they want to participate in as far as equity and inclusion is concerned. And along the same sales pitch as Eileen gave, I would encourage that. Please, this is really important stuff. You should all, if you're not, you should be educating yourself about it. You should be attending seminars. There's tons of stuff online. There's books to read. There's all sorts of things. Some really good things came of the Equity and Inclusion Committee, having done some work. The Black Lives Matter mural, the book group. For me, probably, I think the most important thing that came of it was the impetus to have the social bias training, which I think was very important. And I personally feel it's still a first step, but I think it was very much a necessary thing for us to do, and I hope we will continue to do that work. But I have not seen what feels to me like satisfactory steps taken by this committee. Again, I will accept some of the responsibility for failure of leadership on this part to not have said, all right, you guys need to be doing this and telling us about it. But we had a departure of leadership of the person who was the impetus for the formation of this committee, and also the person who was supposed to be the liaison between the committee and the board. And our failure, mine and David's failure, I believe David would also accept responsibility for this, was not to hold that committee accountable to what we all agreed on, whether it was a written charge or not. Again, you can go back and you can review those tapes till the cows come home. We were pretty clear about what we hoped for, and it didn't happen largely. And that's incredibly frustrating that now we are getting accused of trying to prevent this work from happening, when in fact, my desire is to try and figure out how to do this a whole lot more effectively and a whole lot more efficiently in a way that is much more productive for the municipality. And if people want to participate in civic activities, that's great. I would encourage that. Please, please do. That's my response. And you know, I don't know whether that's satisfactory. Again, I don't know whether I answered specific questions if you had them, because I don't have your statement in front of me. But this has been really, really hard. And I fully understand that these are really uncomfortable conversations and we really need to be having them. But one of the things that I heard from people, and this is not secondhand, this is firsthand from people who were approached, that essentially they were being targeted to be told that they need to change their belief system. And that is not something a town committee should be doing. I mean, you know, should we be calling people in to invite them and say, you know, we really would love to have this conversation with you? And I think that was the intent of some activities that were undertaken. That was not how it was received. How it was received by certain members of the public was as persecution, and they were not happy about it, and that opens us up to liability. And so, you know, this stuff is complicated. I've been as uncomfortable doing this as I have been in anything in my life. I don't want to be uncomfortable, but I signed up for this. I'm an elected official. I got elected to be here, so I'm having this conversation. But I can't choose who else I am going to make uncomfortable by having it arbitrarily and go out and make that decision for them. That's not my role, and that is not the role of a committee that I would appoint. So that's where I'm coming from.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Eileen.
I'm just sorry. I'm sort of using my my clerkness here to say that there's some stuff in the chat. So Fletcher, I don't know if you saw Karen's chat to you to send your document to Alyssa. Do you have her email address?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And then Marnie Rosner asked if there was a report on the training that was conducted for the Equity Inclusion Committee, and is it available to the public?
Wait,
a report on the training.
The social bias training?
I assume so.
I'm not aware of a report yet. We could probably ask for one, but some of that, there's confidentiality related to that. So it would probably be a pretty generic report if there was one.
Okay.
But we can ask for one to be provided.
There's a couple other things. Laura Chapman said we had a charge within the resolution, and then she posted part of the resolution, which was number 2. Do you want me to read it?
Sure.
Number 2, the purpose of the Equity and Inclusion Committee is to identify and advise the Select Board on addressing inequities and encouraging inclusive practices in town services, programs, human resource practices, and decision-making processes. The goal is to ensure that all residents, town employees, and visitors receive equal treatment and opportunity regardless of, but not limited to, race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, income, wealth, veteran status, sexual orientation, age, marital status, familial status, disability, gender identity, and gender expression. And then we have Colin Leach says, in addition, an advisory committee cannot operate in a vacuum. Advising requires being sensitive to, I guess I got cut off. Oh gosh, it goes on and on here.
I think that was Colin going, in addition, an advisory committee cannot, maybe those are jumbled.
Oh,
I think what happened.
To a community's needs and weaknesses and inclusive or of equitable nature, firsthand from people who said this. How about asking the version of events from the other side? And that's it for now.
Okay. I've had those conversations. I would like to highlight that in that excerpt from the resolution, the word advise is clear. Identify and advise is right there. So, if there's question as to whether this is an advisory committee or not, I hope that's clear. And I think my hope has been that advice would be given and then decisions. And Eileen brought up an interesting comparison at the last meeting of the Energy Committee. That the Energy Committee, that we need to treat our committees fairly and equitably if we're going to do this, and that the Energy Committee might be going out to help people weatherize their houses. But certainly in my experience of Energy Committees past or other town committees past, when anything like that is going to occur, it comes to the Select Board first, and that has happened in the setting of this committee as well. We worked through and got to the point of doing a Black Lives Matter mural, which was great. We worked through and got to the point of doing social bias training, which also was great. But when it comes to some of the basic stuff that we were looking for in the initial, and I guess I would argue, and I argue might not be the right term, but I would question whether that citation that Laura made from the resolution is actually a charge. But I also would refer people to the tapes of when this resolution was passed and when people were appointed to this committee, that it was very clear in our conversations that a first step for this committee was to explore the need, and honestly, we talked clearly about having a discussion. Mr. Fairman was part of it from even previous to it being adopted. Was it most appropriate for this to be a Select Board committee, or was it more appropriate for it to be an ad hoc or a civic group? That was part of the questions that we asked very specifically that those be answered by this group, and they were never answered. And so that's where I'm getting back to now, is saying we need the time. And what I am going to propose, because we had some discussion about this, about the appointment of individuals for this committee, also in an executive session. So discussion about appointment of individuals falls well within executive committee purview. And we didn't take any action. And I would like to propose that at our next meeting, we name 3 or 4 members of a task force to go back to the original intent of the resolution and create a charge for the EIC and to recommend a schedule for items in the charge. That's what I would propose based on discussions that we had. I would like there to be a publicly taken action because it resulted from a discussion that occurred in executive session related to appointment of individuals. I am also recommending that we do not reappoint the current Equity and Inclusion Committee until we have had an opportunity to appoint members to a task force. So, and I know that may not be a popular thing. We have had this conversation. If we had spent as much time actually working on these issues as we have fighting and bickering back and forth, I think we'd be a lot further ahead than we are. And I take a certain amount of responsibility for that, and I think every single person in this meeting takes a certain amount of responsibility for that. So let's move forward, folks. Let's stop bickering and start trying to get some solutions. And that starts with a charge and a schedule and figuring out what the steps are we need to take. And that's what I'm hoping the select board will agree to do. Aaron.
Josh, Ellen Pratt has her hand raised.
Okay. Ellen, go ahead.
Hi there. Hi. I am new to this discussion, and so I appreciate hearing a little bit about this. This part of the agenda wasn't framed, so I was unclear a little bit about what was being discussed. But now I'm hearing from you, Josh, something that you all can decide on. I think I understood that the committee would dissolve like today otherwise, right? I mean, doesn't it have to be extended? But that's up to you to decide. But I want to say that I, as a town member, really support your work, and I can see that this has been a really thorny issue that's taking up an inordinate amount of your time. And as a town member, I would really hope that we could get this figured out so that you don't have to spend so many hours on this topic. And I have heard from folks in town that maybe this committee could become a working group and could be not under the purview of the select board. It could be freed up to do whatever it wants, including advocacy, which obviously we need more of, and I would support. But it feels to me like it's just taking way too much of the select board members' time and is burning people out. So thanks again for your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Fletcher, you had a further comment?
Just one minor point, caution. You can violate the open meeting law by circulating things through emails in terms of how that document was generated. But the more fundamental question
which document are you talking
Fletcher,
about?
can I ask you to just clarify that for me? Because my understanding is that if a quorum is not, I agree with you. And again, our intent was not to break open meeting law. We weren't trying to sneak around. We were trying to sift through complicated stuff. But my understanding is, and not that I want to do it again, but in that context, if an email is not shared by more than one select board member with other select board members, then that doesn't constitute a quorum and therefore doesn't fall under open meeting. Am I correct in that? Or I know it's gray, but that's my understanding of it, and I don't want to go to gray area again. So I'm happy to hear your opinion on it.
But that wasn't what was described. It was described that letter was circulated by email. And I'm just cautioning you that you can violate open meeting law that way.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. No. So I think I understand what you're saying, and again, that was certainly not the intent, and I don't think we technically did, but I understand. I get it.
The more fundamental, the more central point that I really like to bring up about how this was handled. All right, I get it that you got feedback from community members who felt that committee members had been inappropriate with them. why on earth did you never ask the committee member to explain themselves?
I did.
That's the piece that I don't get. The minutes don't reflect it. The committee member, and I don't mean individually, if you as a board had a problem with how the committee was functioning, why didn't you ask them to get together with you? The minutes don't reflect that ever happening.
It's a good question. No, and it didn't ever happen. I think I had individual conversations with each and every member of that board, and perhaps that was a mistake. Because it didn't convey, I know what I heard and I know what others heard. I did ask those questions, Fletcher, and I got answers that didn't mesh with what I was hearing. So again, we're not a court of law. It's a he said, she said. In one particular instance, I have been very clear since before this committee was even appointed that there are some, I have a hard time answering that, Fletcher, without making it more personal than I care to in a public setting. I had those conversations, and I was not satisfied that the circumstances were something that we would want occurring on our town committee. So if that individual wants to elaborate and or have further conversation with me and have me share that conversation with you, that's fine. But otherwise, I would consider that a private conversation that is not appropriate.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Having listened to a number of these meetings, my memory may be mistaken, but I recall a board member stating that she had also reached out to the individual members of the committee, some of whom had stated that they had, in fact, individually reached out to members of the community and indicated that they had a difference of opinion about political views, and that there had been a certain amount of advocacy involved. Now, that may be incorrect, but that is not hearsay, which has been used as a description in the past. That's a firsthand account from the people involved, and constitutes a little bit more serious, a little more serious problem, which is, I think, fundamentally what this is about. I believe that our select board has done their best to deal with this problem. Mary, please, come on. I'm sorry, I'm getting a certain amount of feedback here. So I'll leave it at that, and maybe we can go on from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, Eileen, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Wait a second. Liz has had her hand up, so if you want to call on her at some point.
Sure. Liz, go ahead.
I understand that you want to leave it behind, but I looked at the minutes from, I think it was March 17th, and I read what Vera had read out in public session. I found it really inappropriate, to say the least. She's quoting anonymous community members saying that they'd expressed something to her, and then she goes further. She goes on, and then it's, oh, and she drags in the Republican Party. It's like, come on. I'm disappointed that you allowed that to be read in an open session. I think it was totally inappropriate. I'm pretty sensitive to this stuff. Being on the school board, there's all kinds of things you can and can't do. If we had gotten information like you had gotten regarding certain members of the committee, we would have invited that person into an executive session if we felt we needed to and we could find a statute that allowed it, we would have invited that person in to talk with us. We wouldn't have just gone on hearsay for a number of meetings and, conducted ourselves in that manner. So, it's great to say you want to move on. That's fine and well and good. But so much has been implied about that entire committee, and it's not right and it's not fair. And yes, these are difficult things for many people to deal with. But that doesn't mean that you let things go. We deal with difficult things, probably even, just as touchy, if not more so than you. And we don't drop things because they're difficult. I can see clarifying the committee's charge. That I can see. But I cannot see by implying that the whole committee is terrible and that they all did awful things, which is you're proposing we have a task force. Well, you're saying you're shaking your head no, but yet you want to turn this over to somebody else entirely instead of just saying we're going to reappoint these members. Let's have a meeting with this committee. That's what I would like to see happen. You guys sit down with the committee and have a meeting instead of shoving it off on another group entirely to do it. This is your work to do, not a task force. You want to be really careful about people who, I have had discussions with people who, quite frankly, are racist. They're very touchy. I've tried to find common ground with people who I have found common ground with people who are completely on the other end of the political spectrum. And I've worked with them. But many people around the topic of racism get into a huff if anybody suggests that they might want to rethink how they're thinking about the BIPOC community. They're like, oh, I could never be racist. And yet then they come out with some slur or something. That's to be expected. I don't think it's right for a committee member to reach out to call on community members in that manner. I wouldn't do something like that with school board stuff. But still, I don't think that putting it off on a different group is the solution. I think you need to sit down with the members of that committee as a select board, and you need to talk with them directly.
We have done that, Liz. We have done that to start with. Secondly, when you say hearsay, that's you putting those words in on our. I've heard firsthand.
No, Vera's letter quotes anonymous people who have reached out to her. You allowed that if you go back and read that thing.
Okay.
I wouldn't have allowed that to be read.
That was the section of the meeting that is public comment on items not on the agenda. I honestly don't know whether we had that on the agenda at that moment. Vera was not a select board member at that time, and she made a public comment. And I'm sorry if you disagree with it, but I try to allow people to make public comments in open meetings whenever they ask. I very rarely, only once can I remember in 15 years of doing this, where I actually stopped somebody from doing something because it was a specific personal attack against others, against another individual. Otherwise, this is an open meeting. If people want to make statements, they can make statements. And I'm allowing that right now, right here with you, Liz. So don't tell me that I shouldn't have allowed her to make a statement. That's not fair. As far as
I didn't say that, Josh, I did not say that you were listening to random people. I pointed that out in the context of Vera's letter.
No, okay.
That wasn't directed at you at all.
But you said it was hearsay,
So, yeah.
and you said I should not have allowed Barra to make that comment, and I absolutely.
I'm telling you, it was disturbing, very disturbing, and to read that is very disturbing. It's very disturbing to read that.
And I'm sorry that was disturbing for you, Liz. That's the nature of these conversations. I think what has been very challenging for us is an unwillingness to hear disturbing things from people other than a narrow slice that you, Liz, might want to hear from, but others might not necessarily hear the same thing. So these are open meetings, and that's why we have them, so people can express themselves. So I'm not impressed that you are asserting that I should not have allowed that to occur, because I think that's totally inappropriate. But I want to move on because I want to get the work done. We keep coming back to this conversation of us trying to shut things down or to stop the work being done. I don't know where you're hearing that, because I'm not saying that. And so when I said my proposal is that we name members of a task force, I would imagine at least 2, if not 3 of those are current members of the Equity and Inclusion Committee. I have already spoken to members, and I have reached out to other members who I have talked to about that. I would probably be part of that as a select board representative. I gather there's some resistance to that because there's a feeling that I carry too much, whatever. If that's the case, if somebody else wants to do it, Eileen would be the only one probably that would be coming with a fresh set of eyes to this. But honestly, I'm not really in favor of that, because I feel like somebody who has the history, it's important for them to be there. And, Liz, you're saying that we're dumping it in somebody else's lap. I'm just, across the board, Liz, I'm pretty frustrated with the statement you just made. So, Swift, go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Swift. I'm on the Equity Inclusion Committee, for those of you that don't know. I just wanted to share some of the next steps that we had from a Equity Inclusion Committee meeting we had this afternoon, just in relation to what you just said, Josh, about 2 pieces. So one was a request or a recommendation to ask that Eileen does sit on that task force with her history and knowledge, and maybe it is both of you. I know that it's definitely a time commitment, but that was one of the committee's recommendations and requests. And Eileen, I know you had sort of mentioned that you might be interested in doing it last time, so I don't know if it's possible, but that was one of ours. And the other one was the request that the whole committee would, as a slate, be put on the task force, is something that we as a committee wanted to ask as a recommendation. And for those of you that have put in letters that want to continue, I believe that there's one committee member that hasn't submitted one of those letters. But those are the 2. There were other results there in our minutes that you can find when they're posted from the meeting today. But those are the 2 pieces that I wanted to share, and just in response to what you said, Josh, about the who and the who, I guess.
Yeah. Eileen, go ahead.
Yeah, so I actually was trying to farm off the responsibility for being on such a committee to Josh. I'm already on 2 other committees, in addition to being on one in the town of Brattleboro. So I don't feel like I have the bandwidth to be on an additional committee, no matter what it is. I'm happy to attend a few meetings of the task force when it gets formed, if that's something that people want. But I can't really be actively involved in it. I just have too many other things going on.
Thank you, Eileen.
Excuse me, may I ask a question?
Yes, Eva, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I believe I'm right in understanding there's someone from Putney School, a person of color, and somebody from Landmark, a person of color. Who are the other people? Are there other people of color? Is it? I don't know who all is on the committee. I'm sorry to say. I've been focused on my own health and my own life lately. So, do you mind saying the name of the people?
Currently on the committee, David.
Say it again. Say it again.
David, you're on mute.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
I want to say something, and Give me a minute. Bear with me.
Can I name the people on the committee? Because Eva asked, David, and
Yeah.
I'll give you a minute. So the people currently on the committee are, or who have been on the committee, are Mark Thurman from Landmark College, Lisa Munoz from Putney School, who has submitted a letter in response to the select board statement, and that we can put that into the public record because it is a public record. And she has expressed reservations about continuing on the committee. I'm hopeful that she might continue. Laura Chapman is currently on the committee. Swift Everdy, is currently on the committee. John Johnson and Ann Beekman, and I think that's it. Is that right?
Well, I really appreciate what the committee has done in terms of the book groups, the one through the school and so on. I think it motivated many people in the community. Well, I think Quaker Meeting started it. They were doing book groups and addressing issues of systemic racism and white skin privilege. And any of us that are sitting here white, I don't care how poor I grew up, I got white skin, and I know that I have issues sometimes of guilt and shame about that history, and I'm doing my best I can. I'm not in favor of that darn sign by the school. Every winter, it's going to be wiped away with salt and sand. Why don't we have something down by the town hall where everybody coming through and going through can see it? All right, maybe there's something bigger that I'm ignorant about. The other thing is, I appreciate the select board. I have heard some things from the community, and I say to people, and I talk with them and try to explain, but it is a very complicated issue going on here. And I appreciate what you all have done as the board to try to deal with people who are afraid to go anywhere but to talk with you all, that they trust you and see you as somehow connected to a safe place to talk. So I appreciate what both groups have done, and I would like to see it take on the issues, which I understood was said, issues like accessibility, some of those broader issues. Hello. It'd be awfully nice for some of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you so much for saying that. This is the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life, and I think that, and I know very little about it, and I'm constantly trying to catch up and learn. And the things that stick out to me are, I think that Fletcher was right. There was a failure of leadership. I think we've acknowledged that many times. I think we are trying our best. I know that just today, I was reading the minutes from the first two meetings from the committee, the task force that was set up in Keene to try to advise the city council over there. And the thing that I realized is that this is going to take a lot of time to do this right. And the feeling that I get is that we are being pressured all the time to get it done and get it right now. And it's not my area of expertise at all. And the things that stuck out from reading the minutes from the Keene task force was that their task force was advisory just to the city council. And they took a whole year. They took a whole year with a very big group of people from very different backgrounds and areas in the community to come up with statements about, bear with me, the committee or the task force needs to bring a report to the city council about what the problem is, what the goal is, and what the facts and findings are from the community and what their recommendations are. And we as a select board have to come up with that charge that we should have come up with from the beginning instead of just giving it to the committee. And we need to do that, and we need time to do that. And we need to pick the right people to do that, the people that are going to be able to hear what the community has to say, all the community, everybody. And we're trying our best to do that. We really are. And if we drop the ball, if I drop the ball anywhere, I'm sorry. It certainly wasn't my intent to drop the ball. And I think the work really needs to happen. And that's what I got.
We've lost Josh.
Ellen?
Is there any appetite for this group being a working group instead of a select board committee?
It's a really good question, because the question, and Fletcher pointed out this in the beginning, and Howard Fairman pointed it out, that an ad hoc committee wouldn't fall under the same, again, help me if I'm wrong here, Fletcher, but regulations or controls that a select board appointed committee would, and maybe that would be a good thing.
You guys have you've spent an hour on this right now, and I'm sure this is one of many hours you've spent on this, and it just seems like a lot of this could go away if the group was a working group. They could go on and do their work, and you could do your work.
Right, and maybe there could be two groups. There could be an appointed committee that just advises us, and then we come forward with a charge if we want to come up with a committee that's select board appointed to do whatever it is that charge is, and slow it down and do it right, instead of spending all of our time, for lack of a better word, arguing about it.
Yeah.
Swift?
You're muted, I think.
I can speak after. Maybe there's a lot going on in the chat. I got distracted. Sorry.
Yeah. Do you want me to read the chat, Josh? I've got it up.
Sure. Yeah, oh, okay. So Laura, yeah, go ahead, Eileen. Laura's doesn't have a microphone, so.
Right. Okay. So you want me to just read it out? It starts with, I think we left off with Swift saying that Liz had her hand up. So the first one is Michelle Alexoff. Says, just wanted to bring up that an elected member of our town representatives had their own misstep in a public space earlier this year with making a public statement that while the intention was good, was perceived as harmful by some community members. They were offered the grace and space to make amends and issue an apology and continue to do their work as an elected official. I'm wondering if, in the interest of trying to be equitable, why would we not offer the members of EIC the same space and grace to make amends for the harm that they were perceived as doing and be allowed to continue their work as EIC members? And then Laura, I think, responding to, I'm sorry, I don't know whose letter. It says, can you read that letter? We've been talking about a lot of letters.
That was talking about Lisa's letter to the select board.
Oh, so that's up to you, Josh. And then Laura says, hey folks, I have no mic, but just want to send gratitude to all and share statement to the chair's statement. To the Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee, dear Mark, Jamie, Swift, Ann, Lisa, and John, and previous members, Stephen and Angela, I cannot begin to tell you how much the EIC and my time on it has meant to me. When we began this journey, I had hoped that we would be able to make a difference in systematic oppression. Over the course of the past year and a half, you have each shown up through hectically busy schedules, hardships, a pandemic, and the seemingly never-ending list of injustices committed against marginalized folks within and outside of our community. You all centered the work. You wrote beautiful statements of support, some of which were taken up by the select board. You created space for vulnerability, supported POC leaders in their requests to create a mural, helped create the mural, gave advice on policy, created a wildly popular and highly proclaimed book club, and helped educate our community. We were not perfect, but you did the heavy lifting, and it was such an honor to support each step of the way. This work is so much more than any one moment or person, and the incredible relationships that we built while doing it together are solid. We will continue each on our own path and together at different times. I respect you each enormously, will come to you in friendship and support any time. Don't hesitate to reach out. With all my respect and gratitude, Laura. And then Jamie, I think is listing the people on the equity committee members with a link. And that is it so far.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I should like to tie up three loose ends. First, a question to Attorney Proctor. In your professional capacity, are you currently representing the Equity and Inclusion Committee?
I am not.
He stated he was not, if you didn't hear that, Mr. Furman.
Thank you. Yeah, the sound muted, but thank you, Attorney Proctor. Second, just one moment, please. Earlier on, Attorney Proctor referred to 24 VSA 872 regarding the statutory basis of what we're talking about here. It simply says the select board shall have the general supervision of the affairs of the town. Now, another point which was brought up regarding the open meeting law, I'm citing now 1 VSA section 310(3)(b). Meeting shall not mean any communication, including in person or through email, telephone, or teleconferencing between members of a public body for the purpose of scheduling a meeting, organizing an agenda, or distributing materials to discuss at a meeting. So I would say you are in the clear regarding a document that you circulate among you, provided that as the open meeting law continues, provided that no other business of the public body is discussed or conducted, and such a communication that results in written or recorded information shall be available for inspection and copying under the Public Records Act. So that really sets out what's involved here. I know it can be dicey at times, and I've been involved in these discussions as well now and then as to what's allowed and what isn't. But basically, that's what the statute has to say about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I will just reiterate from before that, our intent was definitely not to go around open meeting law. That was not what we were trying to do. We were trying to have challenging conversations in a challenging circumstance, and we try and be very respectful of open meeting law at all times, and I think we're very cautious about it, and this may have been a time when we were not cautious enough, and I apologize if that's the case. But I don't think we specifically broke open meeting law. We just probably pushed our limits a little further than we should have. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I forgot, I wanted to add another point. I've been doing this sort of thing in the arena over 50 years now, and I just wanted to mention to you personally that when you chair a meeting, it is a master class in how to chair a meeting. If someone asked me around here or anywhere else, can you give me some advice on how to chair a meeting? I would say get hold of a Putney Select Board meeting on BCTV and watch what Josh Laughlin does, because he's really got it down. Now, of course, I'm mindful that you've been doing it 15 years, and experience, of course, helps. But nevertheless, my compliments to you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Here.
I do realize also in my pattern from having done this as long as I have, that I sometimes probably am not as cautious about, I'm pretty rote in how I do it because I've done it for a long time. I try and be mindful, and it's particularly challenging in this setting, obviously, but the question of how our system and conduct of meetings, et cetera, is based on a flawed system to start with. I am respectful of that, and we have work to do on that, and that's an equity and inclusion question, definitely, that I'm aware of, and I try and address it, but it's hard to keep the meetings flowing all the time. So, but thank you, I appreciate that. All right, so
Josh, Julia Forsyth has her hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
Thank you. I think the moment at which my own clarity began to emerge was in response to you, David, and your reading of the laying out of this committee work in Keene. I found that very helpful. I think all of us have been listening to the discontent and the layers of rumor and social media that has swirled around this, and the amount of injury that's happened in many, many directions by gossip and innuendo, which is never a great thing in a community, and is so painful to everyone who's touched by it. And it's not simply the people who are most obviously touched, but all the people they touch, and so on and so forth. And certainly as a member of Putney Friends meeting here, the Quakers in town, we have a real care that we find a way to speak our truths firmly and clearly to one another, and also with enormous love and respect. And I feel like we're now reaching that point again, where the town is universally really ready to move in that way. I hope that's true. And I just want to say that that there's no one way this is going to happen, as we're working on all these issues, so many of them, about things that make our community not accessible, not welcoming, not the community we all really want it to be. And there's so many angles. There's not just one. I'm happy to hear how many ways in which we're going to go forward in working on things. That to me seems extraordinarily important. And the select board is in a position to have a broad view of all the things that are happening, and the position to encourage all kinds of community engagement across many different barriers and lines. And that, from my point of view, as a member of this community, is one of the charges I hope you and bodies like the one I'm talking about now, the Friends meeting, will engage in together. And the rec league, and school lunch program, whatever, on and on and on, all of it. We all have to be working on this. There's no one point of view. So I'm glad to hear that you are planning on asking the members of the Equity Committee to be on this newly constructed body, no matter what you call it, but advisory in nature, and certainly in need of clarifying its mission. It's something that everybody agrees on. I hope as you're doing that, you'll take a very wide view of whatever else in town needs to happen. You called it civil groups, I think, Josh. Was that your word?
Yeah, I don't know whether that's the right word or not.
Find a catchy phrase for it. Market it. So as you said, Eileen, in the beginning, our engagement in town committees, but in many, many, many other ways in which we come together that we haven't been able to do for the last year. We've been very held back from one another. So I'm just voicing my personal support for not in any weighing down of the equity committee work, but finding a way to clarify it. I don't care what you call it. It's very important to me that the members of the current committee be included, and that it be a discussion together with select board folk. If you want to invite other people in the town in, that's great too. But anyway, it seems to me now, after this hour, I'm feeling more hopeful than I've felt in a while. I've really been quite worried about the level of friction. And I'm hoping we can really turn away from that now and do the work we really need to do, which is to really examine how we can be an open, welcoming, accessible town. So that was a long one for me, but I'll now retire.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Karen.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Julia, for that. And Fletcher, I want to thank you too for not calling me out for misguiding you on an incorrect statute. I appreciate that. I just want to make a statement that we've all been working really hard, and the past year has been a struggle for many people. And this work is very important to this board and for me. And going through the social bias training, you know, we still have a lot of work to do and a lot to learn. And as long as we're open and we can work together, it's time to move forward. And there are many comments tonight, and they mean a lot. And there's different meaning to each person for all sorts of reasons. So I'm confident that we can pick ourselves back up and work together and move forward with this.
Thank you. All right.
Swift has her hand up.
Josh, I just have to make a statement. I'm sorry. And there's that time is, I have to go very soon. I have something I have to do. And I know that's not convenient, and I don't ever do this, but time, I need to go pretty soon. And I don't know if there's any way we can wrap this up and commit to moving forward. But that would work great for me if we could.
Swift?
I was just going to respond to some of the comments around doing this as an ad hoc committee. And I think the piece of having this be a town appointed committee is so important because it shows such a containership of support from the town versus having some group of citizens come together. Any group of citizens can come together. When it comes from the town, it's saying we support this. We want equity. We want inclusion in our town. And it feels it's such a different place if you think about putting, for those of you that don't look through the lens, I certainly don't. I mean, I'm a woman, but looking through the lens of being in a marginalized group and looking at a town that does have that and centers that, I would feel safer. I would feel more open. I would feel more curious about what Putney's about versus I think most towns have ad hoc groups about equity and inclusion versus this was foundational. There are other towns that are looking to us. This is transformational, and this piece of this is part of what this year is about, of people really waking up to centering this stuff. And it is hard. And there's a piece of when we take that hardship and take it personally, it only gets in the way of the work. So this piece of when we're able to zoom out and be like, yes, this is freaking hard and it's worth it. So that's, I think, that the importance of centering, not centering us as individuals or me as an individual or any of the individuals on the select board or the equity inclusion committee, but centering the zooming out a bit and centering where our goal is, and that just the fact that this committee exists is showing that we're centering this goal and that Putney cares. So that piece feels really important. There was something else, and I wanted to just get curious about this piece coming from our meeting today about the whole committee wanting to be on that task force. I know that there were some individuals that I've heard some of, but we've all submitted letters and we all do want to be part. And I know that there are concerns with people, but there's this, Eileen made this comment about saying like, hey, we need members. We have 6 or 7 members on this committee. So I know that there are concerns with people, but everyone that's on this committee wants to continue, except for that one person that hasn't submitted a letter.
Karen?
Right. I wanted to acknowledge in your packets, there are 3 emails of interest for the EIC. And then there was also an email supporting the EIC from a resident in Putney. So those are all in your packet. I'm sure you've seen them.
I had only seen 2 letters of interest from people.
Okay, so I'm going to name the names if that's okay.
Well, I don't think we're going to appoint that committee tonight. So, and I have to think about my feelings.
As long as the board has acknowledged the emails,
Yes,
okay.
Karen, I believe I got all of them.
Okay, thank you.
I got them too.
Okay, great.
So what I would like to do ideally is between now and our next meeting, have an opportunity to sit down with all the members of the equity and inclusion group and try and figure out a way forward. If I'm going to be the select board representative to this group, I would like to sit down with those committee members, the IC group, and try and take some steps forward.
Right, we had, sorry.
May I join you too, Josh?
I would assume so. I will, yes, I would think so. Ellen, you had a question?
It's not a question. I'm just referring to the purpose of the committee that I see now that's online. And it is so open-ended as a goal for this committee that if it remains a select board committee with this kind of open-ended goal, I feel like it will never complete its work.
Right.
And so if it's advising the select board, it's just going to go on and on and on. And as an advisory committee, I would think you would have very concrete goals that have, timeframes in which you're working to meet, and then you would dissolve that committee.
Exactly.
Well, I would sort of historically agree with you, Ellen. I am very aware that this work is going to go on forever.
Thank you, Josh.
Does that mean this committee, as it is, will go on forever? No, we're all going to come and go at some point. But I agree with you. I think what I am hoping for, and I sort of alluded this in saying, what my hope of a task force would be to go back to the original intent of the resolution and create a charge for the Equity and Inclusion Committee and to recommend a schedule for items in the charge. I think that in that charge, there could be a broader scope that would look at what the future of the committee looks like. But I think one of my goals in thinking of it as a task force is that it's relatively small and agile, because the goal from the select board standpoint for me is to do some separation of church and state, quote unquote. And that's a bad example, but there needs to be select board work that needs to be done, and it needs to be clear and concise, and there needs to be 6 million other things that need to be done, and those can't be select board work, because otherwise that's all we do, and we can't do that because we have to run the town. So I want to sit down with the Equity and Inclusion Committee and figure out what that task force is going to look like and start that conversation. And I would like to do that between now and our next regular meeting, which is 2 weeks from now. And Swift?
I'm just reading in the chat, and it's the same, I'm skimming it, but the same question I have is that we expire today. So
Yeah.
What is being done in the meantime in those 2 weeks?
So in those 2 weeks, I'm hopeful that the group that has been the committee, that we can meet and decide on sort of the makeup of a task force and how we're going to proceed.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Regarding the proposal that the Equity and Inclusion Committee become the proposed task force, that of course is excellent political strategy and tactics, but it also defeats the purpose. I would suggest that you recruit other people and then invite as many people as you receive from the general public. Invite the same number of people from the Equity and Inclusion Committee, so that you have a balanced perspective on what is being discussed.
Thank you. I agree, and I think I just implied that in what I said, is that I don't think that the entire Equity and Inclusion Committee being a task force to figure out what the Equity and Inclusion Committee is going to do makes sense, because it hasn't worked yet. It's worked well to do a bunch of things, and I really, really, really appreciate Laura, her statement in the chat, and I'm tremendously grateful for the work this committee has done. I really am. I'm also challenged by how to move it forward without a significant restructuring from the select board standpoint. Again, I would absolutely encourage everybody on this call to please be an activist. Do your work, do this work. We all need to be doing it. The select board can't do it all the time because we have too many other things to do and too limited hours. And unless something shifts about how our jobs are functioning, we just I physically can't do it. It's not possible. So, Swift, to answer your question, I am not intending to reappoint people again tonight. I am hopeful that we can meet sometime in the next roughly 10 days. So probably, maybe it has to be that Monday or Tuesday, but within the next 2 weeks before the next meeting, so that at the next meeting, we can hopefully approve a task force group to work on this issue. Eileen.
So yeah, two things to that point where we all have lots of things to do. My original sales pitch was actually because I am on 3 different committees, commissions, and select board. Was on 4. I was a lister. That was a statutorily incompatible office. We do need people to be on other committees and commissions. And I'm looking at all of you right now, and I think a lot of you would make excellent additions to the workings of the town. And that's another way to introduce that lens. So that was the first thing. The second was more of a question. Are you thinking that the full select board is going to meet, or
No.
just?
No,
Okay.
I'm thinking that I, as the select board representatives with this group, will sit down with the Equity and Inclusion Committee and try and figure out some steps forward. And
Well, then I feel like that the select board needs to meet again before our next meeting, after you've had that meeting with the EIC, that we can talk about this. Or we have to talk about it in an open meeting that night.
we'll see what the result of the meeting is and then go from there. Does that sound fair?
Very good. And I have to go. As important as it is, I have to go. I'm sorry.
That's fine. No problem. I'm hopeful that we're pretty much done with this conversation. If anybody else has anything they really want to add, please.
There's still things in the chat.
Could you read them, please?
You get it? Mine's not come. Oh, I got it up. Do you have it? I'm not sure where we left off.
Yeah, I don't, let's see. Well, subcommittee work is happening with select board writing in charge.
I think
Laura,
it's with both of Tall's statements. I didn't read Tall's statements out loud, but I referenced the first one.
So EIC technically has a meeting coming on 4/5 before the select board's next meeting. Will the select board officially grant an extension to the EIC to remain operating as they have been with all members until the official restructuring happens? Given that there are only 2 members that are currently appointed, a gathering of that group would not constitute a quorum or a meeting. So I would say that group can comfortably meet.
Wait, I thought you're saying Laura and I, because we have technically more. I thought we were all reappointed and all of everybody expires today.
No, you and Laura don't, because your appointments are year-long appointments. But as 2 appointed members, you don't constitute a quorum. Well, I mean, I guess if there's only 2 members and 2 people, I guess my opinion would be that if this group wants to meet and talk, they should go ahead and do that. And I guess since it's not officially an appointed committee, as of, or since there are only 2 members as of today, then how that works from an open meeting law standpoint, I honestly don't have a good answer for you. But I personally think it would be fine for this group of people to meet and talk about their EIC work. I think that is fine. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, I'm with apologies for perhaps prolonging this discussion, but earlier I would have supported the suggestion that had been made a while back of basically separating the work of this group from the select board until Miss Everdy spoke, and I think she very eloquently expressed the need of this to be included under the auspices of the town. And at the risk of making this needlessly complex, would there be any value to basically having 2 groups, a broader group which is discussing this in the community at large, and including as many people as possible? Because one of the things that concerns me is I mean, I'm a card-carrying liberal and proud of it, but not everybody in this town is, and I do worry a little bit, and maybe needlessly, that some of the voices of our community members are not being heard in all of this. I would love to see as broad an effort as possible made to include people, including some efforts at advocacy, and perhaps changing minds, and then perhaps a smaller group within that group reporting to the town government with specific suggestions, such as the Black Lives Matter sign, which was painted in front of the school, or something equivalent elsewhere, because that's also valuable. But maybe we could separate the functions a little bit, and if it isn't too complex, it might have of some value. So I just put that out there for consideration. Thanks.
That's my hope, Robin, is that what we can figure out in a smaller group setting is what's best suited to what and how that fits into the select board structure. Because I absolutely agree that this needs to be part of select board conversation, and it needs to be prominent in it, but it also needs to be manageable from a select board standpoint, because otherwise it's too time consuming. So what that separation between 2 different groups, whether it's an advisory committee and an ad hoc committee that's sort of, approved by the board, or I honestly don't know the definitions surrounding the various different possible committee structures well enough to say that with certainty at this moment. But I agree. I think there's ongoing work for the town, and there's ongoing work for everybody in the town. So let's figure out how to do the town's work so we can work on that and figure out how to promote all the other stuff that needs to be done as well. So, all right.
I guess I'm just needing clarity on what's happening during these 2 weeks with this. With technically, Laura and I are still committee members on a committee that doesn't exist, or we are the Equity Inclusion Committee. A lot of public brought up the concern last meeting of the actions of canceling or pausing this meeting send a message. It gives an effect. It changes the climate. So this piece of, even if it's 2 weeks that we're pausing, or what are we doing in these 2 weeks interim, I think is something important to clarify.
You have 2 appointed members to your committee. We have not officially unappointed you. So I guess that's 2 members. Given that in the resolution it stated a membership of 9, that would make me suspect that 2 of you would not constitute a quorum, and therefore you could sit in on a meeting with all the other members, and that would not be subject to open meeting law. That's my opinion. That's not written in stone. But maybe what we can do, Swift, is if you have an already scheduled meeting, maybe I can come to that meeting. If that
We have one on the 5th. We have it on the 5th, but I don't know if that's enough time because David seemed to say that he was wanting to have another select board meeting before or after that.
Sorry, I can't open my calendar while I'm having this on. So today's
The next committee meeting is, the next select board meeting is on the 7th. Our next meeting that we're scheduled, we do it on the first Monday, is on the 5th. So that's only 3 days for you to, if maybe you guys could schedule, you folks
That's
could
fine.
schedule a meeting on the 6th, but that's not enough time.
No, that's fine.
So maybe it's,
So why don't
sorry, it's fine that 3 days before the select board meeting, we have our meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will plan on attending that meeting. Is that all right? And we will, well, it's an open meeting, so of course, but can I be an agenda item on your meeting?
Yes.
And let's
only
talk about how to move forward.
Yeah, so there's also just in the chat, Jamie is asking, so that means that Mark and Lisa and John and Jamie are no longer on this committee as of tonight.
I guess technically that's true because it's expired as of right now. I guess I can try and restate the same thing over and over again, and maybe I do or maybe I don't, but the hope is to reappoint some members of this committee to a task force that's working to figure out what this committee would be doing going forward. So, I feel like there's trying to be wordsmithing to make it seem like we're shutting down a committee, and I don't know what the goal of that is. That's not the intent. The intent is how to go forward. So I would love to attend yours and Laura's meeting on the 5th, and hopefully everybody else who's a member of the Equity and Inclusion Committee or historically has been, will come to that meeting and we can work on how to move ahead. So, we're not extending the appointments for another month at this point. So there's 2 members that have current appointments, and hopefully other members will be willing to participate going forward.
So Laura in the chat, let's do it.
And I am actually sorry, our equity inclusion is, there was a mistake in Tall's post. Our regular meeting is the 12th, but I'm sure we can schedule a special meeting on the 5th if that works for you, or maybe next week to just give a little bit more time.
Yeah, why don't I might ask Karen to communicate with you about that, Swift, to figure out a timing. But maybe we can do a Google poll or something. I don't know how you guys organize this stuff, but
I know this is all out of all of it, but do we need to reappoint a chair, or Laura and I as co-chairs? Both of our chairs are on that.
I don't think you probably need to worry about it at the moment, but that's just an opinion. If you feel you need to appoint a chair, that's up to you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I would suggest that clearly, just as on a 3-member select board, 2 members are a quorum, or on a 5-member select board, 3 members are a quorum. On a 9-member Equity and Inclusion Committee, 5 members are a quorum. And there are only 2. There will be only 2 members, so they cannot possibly have a quorum until the committee has been reconstituted.
That was sort of what I was implying, but I didn't want to state it as law without knowing that. But I would make that assumption as well. So I think that you can safely meet as a group, and you're not technically a committee, but there happen to be 2 appointed members who are attending, or however. But let's work on a schedule and then we'll go from there, Swift. Does that sound fair? All right. Anybody else? Okay. I don't see anything in the chat and I don't see any hands raised. So thank you all. I know this is challenging, and I hope we can do our best figuring out how to go forward, and let's make it more productive going forward. But thank you. Town manager's report. Karen, I don't see you having anything there.
No, I have a list, but I think most of it can wait. I just want to mention that the pool fundraiser is in progress, and letters went out to 1,800 addresses. And at the moment, we have $1,995 in bottle redemptions. And we have $10,355 that have been donated within the community already. So that is, I'm hoping for more. We will send out, a second round of letters if we need to. I did touch base with our pool guy, Pat Node, and he is booked solid until 2022.
Wow.
Yeah. But he told me, he said, find a auto body guy that can do fiberglass. So I'm working with a resident in Putney, and David is going to be in contact with him as well. They're going to go look at the pool and determine how much work is needed. So we may be able to just patch this year.
Buy us a year, yeah.
Buy us a year. Alyssa's gone ahead and obtained a list of other pool contractors. So we're going to reach out to them too to see if somebody might be able to do it, maybe in the fall. And that way it'll be done and ready for the spring. So I'm being optimistic that we can still open the pool for the summer. And what else? Oh, and as far as, I want to recognize 2 Development Review Board members. Carl Noe has served on the Development Review Board for 19 years, and he just recently stepped down. So back in 2002, yeah, he was on the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and the Zoning Board of Adjustment changed their name to the Development Review Board in 2008. So 19 years of service. Thank you very much, Carl.
Yeah,
and Mark Bowen, I have him 13 years as serving on the Development Review Board.
Wow.
So they are going to be missed. That was a solid team, the Development Review Board. They worked well together. So we are looking for 2 members, and we desperately need 2 members for that board because it has to function.
Yeah, that's a board that is we can't function as a town without that board.
No, we can't. We won't even be able to do any permitting for any major projects that needs Development Review Board approval. So that's my plea for 2 members. And I think everything else can wait.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
First, regarding the fundraiser for the pool, of course, I received it in the mail, and I wanted to congratulate whoever worked on it. It is excellently done. But I do have a couple of questions for our town manager regarding it. It refers to hiring a contractor to replace the cracked fiberglass shell. How did the shell wind up cracked?
Most of it's from the sun, Howard. And the way the pool is designed, it has this ramp that actually gradually goes into, the pool. And that fiberglass has raised up, and it's been like that for the last 3 years. And it did crack It had a crack in it 2 years ago because last summer we didn't open because of COVID. Plus we had a crack in there. But it's from the weather. The pool is drained in the wintertime. So that could be part of it too. I went up there this week and there's still ice, you know, in the pool. So the weather does not help it. And the sun definitely does not help it. So yeah, we do have some major cracks.
Unlike a fiberglass pool, it's a concrete pool with a fiberglass liner. So, which is maybe less than ideal, but it's what we have and what we've loved. So we're going to keep working with it. But that nature of, you know, my impression is that, you know, sort of movement of concrete as it ages underneath fiberglass makes it prone to that cracking. So hopefully, and we've talked about whether next time around we would do what's called a gunite liner, which would be a different nature and more flexible. But I don't.
Yeah, the gunite.
People.
Right, the gunite would probably last forever, but it's more like $438,000.
So Mr. Fairman, as far as your pool fundraiser effort is concerned, if you put, you know, 425 in, then we can go ahead with the gunite. All good.
Well, if you work a bit harder to convince me, I'll think about it.
Okay.
But beyond that, Mr. Chairman, I guess a couple of other questions. The town obtained an estimate of $125,000. From what I've heard, only one pool contractor was asked. Now, this is an attempt to spend what for most of us is real money. So I'm wondering, isn't this an appropriate one to go out to bid?
We got the opinions of 3 different, one of them was the gunite person.
Right.
We weren't technically soliciting bids, I don't think, at this point, but we did explore it with several different people, Mr. Fairman. So Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly, Josh. We were just soliciting like a repair, what we would be looking at. When the work has to be done, Mr. Fairman, we will probably put it out to bid. And now that we have a list of different companies, we will certainly do that because obviously, you know, if we can get a good quality contractor to come in and do it quickly and for less money, that would be appropriate. So.
And what we did when we first started this conversation was went and contacted a handful of people to get an idea, for example, of what gunite would cost, what it would cost to do the most basic repair, and what it would cost to do sort of a significant repair. So we're
right. We looked at, you know, a pool company that could put a liner in there, and we were like, yeah, well, that probably wouldn't work, you know. So I did reach out to several different companies, and of course everybody was busy, and then COVID hit, and then people weren't busy, but
now they're way busy. I mean, from what I've heard, the pool market is just hugely in demand. So
right.
All right, anything else?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, simply because it's been mentioned this evening that I believe it was the pool contractor who said, maybe you should talk to a person who does auto body work, who might be able to make a temporary repair. I'm guessing, given the usual cost of auto body work, that $125,000 might be somewhat more than is needed. So this might be useful information to make available to the public because it could be motivational in terms of $125,000 is a reach, but a lesser amount is not. And then in regard to the whole question of a person who does auto, Babbitt may have some expertise in this. I know he's now gone, but he may have some expertise in this regard that could be germane here.
He
Right.
does, and I think Karen said he's working. There's a couple good auto body people in town, retired and otherwise, that
Right.
that I think he's thinking of to have that conversation. So
Yeah.
But long term, Karen, we want to point out that we do intend to do the actual full repair. So the money that we're raising is still going to go towards that.
Right. So I wanted to state, Mr. Fairman, that although we're bringing in donations, it's going into a certain line item specific for the pool. That money will remain in a pool capital for any future repairs. And eventually we are going to have to replace the fiberglass. Building or putting in a brand new pool someplace, that is totally out of the question. That pool is sited where it is. We can do very little to change it because the site is so small. So we're going to have to work with what we have. But any monies that we're fundraising for that pool will stay in that fund for that pool specific.
And I think that Karen said that trying to do anything else was not possible. It would be possible, but it would be, I mean, for example, where was it, Karen? The town of somewhere up north just did a brand new pool and it was $1.2 million. So unless we really want to shift our nature of our pool, we're looking at, 10% for doing the repairs we need.
Right.
And I'm sure there's a range of pools. I'm sure there's a range of possibilities, but
Yeah.
it would get into serious money if we were to look at a new pool.
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
our town manager mentioning that the money, if raised and not spent, would be put into, she used the word line item. Under Vermont law, if it is town money, you're creating a reserve fund. Now, if it is not town money, then I think you might wish to obtain some banker's advice or legal advice as to whether in fact you can put it into a town account or whether you need to put it into a trust account, because it is not the town's money. It has not been raised by taxes, and it has not been granted to the town for any other purpose than repairing the pool right now. That's what the fundraiser letter says.
Right.
And so really, if you're going to set the money aside, you need to tell the public that this is what you're going to do.
Yeah, I don't think the intent is to set the money aside. The intent is to keep the money until, and I know Karen has research on how fundraising relates to municipal funding, and maybe a line item. I know you've been, Karen, you can speak to that if you want to, but I think the intent regardless is to do the repair on the pool. So that's what we're fundraising for.
Yes.
And that for all practical purposes, I think would be considered a designated fund, although we haven't asked the public to vote to assign it as such. So we probably need to not name it that.
Right.
Aaron.
So, Mr. Fairman, I did consult with VLCT and I did get an email back from them, and I don't have it in front of me, but I can certainly share it with you tomorrow.
Please do.
I will.
I'm not trying to obstruct here. I'm just making sure that we do it exactly the right way so the pool gets fixed. And if the money has to be set aside for a while, that it is set aside in the appropriate manner, given that it would appear to be a restricted fund first, because it has been solicited for the specific purpose. I cannot see how anyone could, who does these things, could say, oh, well, it really is not restricted. You can use it for anything. That's the first point.
Yeah, no, I completely understand what you're saying, and I appreciate it too.
Now, I'm also questioning whether, as it is public money, donated for the purpose of a public project, whether in fact it is even at any point the town's money, and therefore may need to be in a trust account because it never is and never will be the town's money. It is money where a bill comes in and you take the money which has been donated to pay the bill, but at no time there is the money actually the town's money. Now, I'm not speaking as an attorney, but let me put it this way. When I was executive director of a museum, we ran into this difficulty with restricted funds. And there actually are some very profound legal implications to not respecting the law regarding restricted funds. This is why I'm bringing it up.
Right.
So,
well, thank you, Howard.
Yeah, and I think, Karen, maybe you maybe forward that. I would suspect that our auditor would probably have a pretty good sense of how this should be handled. So maybe you forward that letter from VLCT to the auditor and ask an opinion.
Yep. When I first started and I asked the question to VLCT because I wanted to make sure we were doing it right. So.
Yeah. Good. Well,
I will
we'll keep
share
exploring
that response.
All right. Any other business?
Other business?
I just wanted to make sure that my statement in the chat was put in, or I can just say it out loud. I just wanted to thank the committee members that are no longer serving, Mark Thurman, Lisa Munoz, Ann Beekman, John Johnson, and Jamie Conqua. I said thank you so much again and again to all those involved in this, and especially to the committee members. This work is wild, and I'm so grateful again and again and again and again. So just wanted to.
And I want to be clear that I'm hopeful that that members will be involved in this process going forward. So
Thank you.
All right. Anything else for other business? Okay. I don't think we need an executive session.
No.
Our next meeting is April 7th, 2021 at 5:30 right here. And this meeting will be available through BCTV probably within a couple days if people want to review. And take a look at that pool fundraiser and dig deep into your wallet. And thank you all for being here and sharing your evening with us. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second that. And if there's no further discussion, then all in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody. Good night.